There was no spray, no chemical smell, no exterminator truck in the driveway, and yet by morning the line of ants was gone. The roaches that had ruled the dark corners stopped moving. The crawling invasion that made a grown adult feel helpless simply ended. Not with poison fog, not with some expensive monthly treatment. Just a pale, ancient dust, quiet as flour, cheap as regret. You've probably seen it before and never looked twice. A soft powder in a plain bag, no dramatic branding, no futuristic promises. Just crushed stone from the remains of something older than cities. And that is exactly why almost nobody believes in it. Because we've been trained to think effective things must smell strong, sound scientific, and come with a warning label big enough to scare us. But this powder has been used, in one form or another, for far longer than modern pest control has existed. And once you understand what it is, you start noticing a strange pattern. The simplest solutions are often the ones no one profits from explaining. This is the story of an ancient material, a forgotten mechanism, and the reason so many people keep fighting bugs the expensive way when nature already solved the problem. The powder is called Diatomaceous earth. And the strange thing about it is this: it doesn't work like poison. It works like truth, slow, silent, unavoidable. Because the bug kills itself just by walking through it. That sounds impossible at first. A powder that kills insects without spraying, baiting, trapping, or gassing them. But that's exactly what makes it so powerful. And once you see how it works, the whole industry starts to look different. Most people think bugs are beaten with stronger chemistry. More toxicity, more odor, more force. But diatomaceous earth comes from tiny fossilized aquatic organisms called diatoms. Long before human beings built houses, these microscopic life forms lived, died, and settled into the earth in massive deposits. Over time, their remains formed a soft, mineral dust. That dust looks harmless, and to us, it mostly is harmless when handled properly in the right form. But to insects, it is something else entirely. Imagine walking barefoot across a floor that looks smooth, but is actually covered in millions of microscopic shards. Now imagine your entire survival depends on a thin, protective outer layer. That is the secret. Bugs don't die because the powder is poisonous. They die because the powder damages the waxy coating on their exoskeleton and dries them out. That's it. No neurotoxins. No dramatic chemistry lesson. Just a physical mechanism. A forgotten one, and that is why it feels almost suspiciously simple. You've seen this your whole life. Dust dries things out. Ash changes the ground. Powders cling to surfaces. Ancient people understood this instinctively, even if they didn't use modern words for it. Long before laboratory branding, humans were using minerals, ash, lime, and fine earths to preserve grain, protect storage spaces, and control rot, insects, and contamination. Not because it was trendy, because it worked. And when something works for ordinary people, with ordinary hands, it tends to survive for generations. Then the modern world arrives. A company can't build a glamorous empire around something that sounds like old fossil dust. It can build one around subscription treatments, branded formulas, specialized applications, recurring service visits, and the promise that only trained professionals can save you. That doesn't mean all pest control is fake. Sometimes severe infestations really do need expert intervention. But it does mean many people are taught to skip over the simplest layer of the solution because a cheap answer does not fit an expensive business model. That is the mysterious truth at the center of this story. Some knowledge disappears, not because it failed, but because it was too affordable, too ordinary. Too easy to pass from neighbor to neighbor without permission from a system. And the viewer's real pain point is not just the bugs. It's the humiliation, the self-blame, the feeling that if ants keep returning, if roaches keep appearing, if fleas keep surviving, then maybe you are dirty, careless, lazy, or hopeless. That is what pest problems do to people. They turn a practical issue into a personal failure. You clean more, spray more, spend more. Then when the problem returns, you assume you did something wrong. But often the old belief is the real trap. The old belief says, stronger chemicals equal stronger results. The new model is different. The new model says, understand the weakness of the pest, then use the simplest force that matches it. And insects have a weakness older than every brand name on a hardware store shelf. They must stay sealed. They must protect moisture. Their armor is not armor in the way people imagine. It is more like a thin survival skin. Break that barrier, and time does the rest. This is why diatomaceous earth is especially effective against crawling insects, ants, roaches, fleas, bedbugs in some use cases, earwigs, silverfish, and more. Not because it chases them, because it waits. It turns the path into the trap, and that changes everything. Because once you stop trying to bomb the whole problem, you start thinking like water. Where do they travel? Where do they enter? Where do they hide? Where does the unseen line become visible? That is where this powder belongs. Not dumped in dramatic piles, not scattered like snow all over your house. Used with precision, used like ancient intelligence. Here is the simple method. First, get the right kind. This matters. Use food-grade diatomaceous earth, not the kind meant for pool filters. That is one of the most important distinctions in this entire story. People hear one name and assume all versions are interchangeable. They are not. Second, find the roots. Not the places that upset you emotionally, the places the insects actually use. Baseboards, cracks, under sinks, behind appliances, along entry points, under pet bedding, if dealing with fleas, and only when used appropriately and carefully. Around the outside perimeter in dry areas, near the legs of shelves where ants climb. The power is not in panic. The power is in placement. Third, apply a very thin layer. This is what most people often get wrong. They think more powder means more power, so they pour thick lines and big white patches everywhere. But insects often avoid heavy piles. A thin, barely visible dusting works better because they walk through it naturally. The goal is contact, not intimidation. Fourth, keep it dry. Moisture weakens the effect because the drying action is the mechanism. If the area gets wet, the powder clumps and loses efficiency until dried or replaced. That is why people sometimes say it didn't work. What they often mean is they used too much, placed it badly, or let it get damp. Fifth, give it time. This is another mental trap of modern life. We expect immediate drama. Spray, drop, dead. But physical control works more like a silent process. The bug crosses. The coating is damaged. Moisture is lost. The insect weakens. Then dies, not always in front of you. Not always instantly, but steadily. And sometimes that steady action is more reliable than flashy chemicals that kill a few visible insects while leaving the deeper movement untouched. Now let's talk about scale. Because most people first use something like this in a tiny crisis. A kitchen ant trail, a roach under the sink, a flea flare-up. But the principle scales: small apartment, large home, storage shed, chicken coop in carefully appropriate settings, grain storage historically, garden borders in dry weather. Once you understand the mechanism, You begin seeing surfaces, roots, thresholds, and behavior instead of just a bug problem. That shift is powerful. You stop acting desperate. You start acting observant. That emotional change matters more than most people realize, because a big part of what these industries sell is not just treatment. It is relief from uncertainty, but certainty can come from understanding too. The hidden resource here is not only the powder, it is your ability to read the environment, to notice where the insects must move, to use a low-cost material with calm precision, to participate in the solution instead of outsourcing every problem the moment it becomes uncomfortable. Now, objections. Is it safe? Safer does not mean careless. Even food-grade diatomaceous earth is still a fine dust. You do not want to breathe it in. You do not want clouds of it floating around your living space. You should apply lightly, avoid inhalation, keep it away from eyes, and use common sense around children and pets. Read the product label. Use the correct product. Use only as directed. That is the adult version of natural living. Not fear, not recklessness. Respect. Another objection. If it works so well, why doesn't everyone use only this? Because no single method solves every pest problem. That is important. Reality is more honest than hype. Some infestations are too advanced. Some insects require combined strategies. Some situations need sanitation changes, sealing entry points, baiting, moisture control, laundering, vacuuming, outdoor habitat reduction, or professional help. But that does not weaken the case for this ancient powder. It strengthens it. Because the strongest solutions are often systems, not miracles, and diatomaceous earth fits beautifully into a system. Seal the crack, dry the leak, remove food sources, dust the root. Repeat calmly. Now the impossible result starts making sense. No spray, no fumes, no expensive package, and yet the insects disappear. Because the answer was never hidden by complexity. It was hidden by plainness. That is how forgotten knowledge survives, not in secret vaults, in dull bags on low shelves, in old farming practices, in quiet advice from people who still remember that the earth itself contains tools. Think about ancient storage methods. Think about how often traditional societies used what was abundant, mineral, dry, and local. They could not afford waste. They could not afford marketing myths. Their methods were filtered by consequence. If a technique failed, crops were lost. Food was lost. Life became harder. So when a simple material survived across generations, that alone tells you something. It does not mean old ways were perfect. It means some old ways were brutally tested. And what survives brutal testing deserves attention. What makes the modern mind reject such a thing is not evidence. It is aesthetics. We trust complexity because it looks expensive. We distrust simplicity because it feels too close to being free. That pattern shows up everywhere. Food, health, building, gardening, energy. The more disconnected people become from direct cause and effect, the more they start assuming solutions must come wrapped in authority. But sometimes the authority is the mechanism itself. Sometimes the truth is visible the moment you stop asking, "What brand should I buy?" and start asking, "What actually kills the insect?" That question changes the room. Because once you ask it, most of the theatre falls away. And in the empty space left behind, simple things begin to look powerful again. A fossil powder, a dry path, an insect crossing its own ending. There is something almost philosophical about that. The world is full of forces that do not shout. Slow forces, quiet forces, unbranded forces. And human beings keep overlooking them because they don't feel dramatic enough to be modern. But nature is not interested in drama. Nature is interested in function. That is the ultimate philosophy beneath this whole story. We are often taught to ignore what is humble, to doubt what is ancient, to pay more attention to what is sold than to what is true. And that habit makes people weaker than they need to be. Not just in pest control, in life. Because once you recover the ability to notice forgotten mechanisms, you start seeing them everywhere. In compost, in rainwater, in soil, in food preservation, in seed saving, in passive cooling, in hand tools, in old houses built for climate instead of fashion. You realize civilization did not begin with convenience. It began with observation, and observation still wins. So the next time you see a line of ants, a roach slipping behind the stove, or signs of tiny invaders trying to claim your space, remember this. Your first problem is not the bug. Your first problem is the story you were taught. The story that says only costly solutions are real. The story that says forgotten knowledge must be primitive. The story that says if something ancient still works, it must be a coincidence. It isn't. It is memory. Buried in the earth, bagged on a shelf, waiting for someone to trust simple truth again. And that is why this powder matters. Not because it is magical, because it isn't. It is better than magical. It is understandable. It is practical. It is cheap enough for ordinary people. It restores a sense of control. It reminds you that some of the best tools were not invented yesterday. They were merely abandoned. If this changes the way you see the world, then maybe that is the real victory. Not just fewer bugs, but fewer illusions. And once you start noticing that pattern, you may never look at modern solutions the same way again.